It's my pleasure to be here with Professor Tamar, who's the professor emerita of the Jewish Philosophy Department at Bar-Ilan University, continues to teach at Madreshet Lindenbaum, and is a leading scholar on many topics focusing on theology, philosophy of halakha, challenges of historicism, biblical criticism, postmodernity, and feminism. And a book that was transformative in my life, Expanding the Palace of Torah, Orthodoxy and Feminism, is going to be our topic tonight. Just a few questions. First, maybe you can explain to us, what exactly is this concept? I mean, you wrote hundreds of pages. What exactly is this concept of expanding the Palace of Torah, and why did you write this?
Okay. I wrote it for myself. But the book is a play on a statement of Rav Kook in a letter that he wrote in response to a disciple of his who was teaching Tanakh in Yerushalayim. And he wrote, Rav Kook, how am I going to teach the chapters of Genesis with the theory of evolution? And Rav Kook responded to him that even though we don't have to say holy, holy, holy every time we see a new idea that's spread in the name of science, nevertheless, you can also give it the benefit of the doubt. And if you explore that idea and it holds water, then this is a sign that rather than apologizing or revising the Torah, you have to expand in order that it should be able to include the contrary opinion. So that the Torah isn't something static, but rather it is also informed in our understanding of it through the challenge of new ideas.
Beautiful. Now, you talk about legal cumulativism. Can you sort of explain to us briefly what that is, and what are some of the opportunities to utilize that, and what are some of the parameters?
First of all, cumulativism, I wouldn't say is applicable just to legal matters. I think all of the Torah. Okay. Cumulativism really is, it's not a new theory, or it's not something prescriptive, it's rather descriptive. It's saying how things are. That is, whenever you have an idea and you transfer it from one generation to another, or from one person to another, the new context already informs the original idea and sheds it in a different light. So that never can you take an idea from the beginning of time and transfer it through the end of time, till the end of time, and imagine that the understanding of it will remain exactly the same. Context always has some impact on our understanding and meaning. And that's what I mean by cumulativism.
Now, in regards to evolving revelation, you primarily focus on feminism. Well, what else would you say that applies to?
It could apply to anything. That is, I have a rather radical and postmodern view of meaning. Depending on the context, sometimes things that seem totally off the wall, the meaning of any particular statement, some interpretation might seem totally off the wall in one context, but in another context appears absolutely reasonable. When you talk about the biblical phrase, and he shall rule over you, which was one of the curses that God placed on Eve after the banishment from the Garden of Eden. Is that a curse? Is it something that will continue the same over time? Is it a call for us, a challenge to try and overcome it, such as by the sweat of your brow you will eat bread? Does that mean that we always have to sweat when we're eating bread, or can we try and find some technological solutions to make things easier? So also with regard to the status of women and many other things.
Lamasa, practically, how do you think rabbis can embrace cumulativism in their rabbinate? Let's take poskim, for example, legal decisors. Can they do this consciously, or does it have to be
I think it's always been unconsciously. For some rabbis and poskim, it has even been conscious. Today, the fact that we know that context is changing original meanings may give a person a feeling of license in trying to maneuver consciously with the constraints of texts and know that they're maneuvering, whereas in the past they might have not been conscious of their maneuvering, but the same restraints apply as before.
On the topic of Rav Kook, why do you think he wasn't a feminist? Meaning, he progressive in so many areas and developing a theology that enables feminism to flourish, and I found your ideas very compelling and convincing. Why do you think, when the most famous example, women's suffrage, why do you think he was opposed?
Rav Kook, with all his greatness, was a child of his times, and women's suffrage was at that time that he was against it, not common in many countries. And when you come to his son already, he has a different attitude regarding the inclusion of women in leadership and other areas of Jewish life. And Rav Kook also had a very essentialist view of women, which was benign, but nevertheless in a hierarchy.
Do Rav Kook's paradigms work outside of a messianic context? And, like, for example, what we're discussing this topic today, to what is it in any way limited because if you're outside of the messianic context?
I think it would exist, especially outside of music. Why? Because whenever you talk about grand narratives and you try and fix them a particular time, the facts often fly in your face. Whereas if you don't say these are messianic times, then his paradigm of a dialectic where first you think it's one meaning and then a new context brings a different meaning and then you have to go on and on and on. This works much better in non-messianic times because it can go on and on and on without you having to face, but now we should have already arrived. And that's the big crisis of Kook ideology today in the state of Israel, where all the things that were supposed to happen are not happening.
So, what? And I know there's no defined process, but what's a process or a pedagogy for determining if the new can be holy? Right? We encounter new phenomena, and one is trying to figure out how to incorporate, how to challenge, or in the Hegelian sense, how to reach a synthesis.
There's no neat formula, and you're always left with a feeling of doubt, and you have to take chances. Throughout Jewish history, we've often only decided retroactively whether something was actually kosher or not kosher. In the period of Christianity versus Judaism, in the period when Jesus Christ first emerged, and afterwards the Maimonidean controversy, and afterwards the controversy between Hasidut and Yiddish, the controversy of Shabtai Tzvi. In all these cases, if you were living at the time, you'd have to take a leap. You don't know.
So what I hear you saying is that in a culture today that seems to embrace chumrah, stringency, and being makpid, being extra careful, that you're actually saying there's a religious value to embracing risk and not being overly cautious.
Not always. Sometimes you may be making a big mistake.
Right.
Yeah.
And are those mistakes also holy within that paradigm because of the learning process?
I don't know how God counts for his books.
Yes. Right. Okay, so my last question for you is on Orthodox feminism and how it's developing in Israel versus how it's developing in America. Can you share just a few commonalities in the trends and a few differences in the trends?
Because of the process of globalization, the differences are becoming less and less. There's so much communication and travel between America and Israel, a lot of cooperation. But when the movement began, it appeared to be coming from the West, appeared to be initiated through America, and American Jewish feminism was very practical, very political, whereas in Israel, in the beginning, the feminist movement appeared much more conservative, much more careful. On the other hand, in Israel, because religion is being played out on a national level, there are so many other areas in which the feminist perspective is gaining traction, and there's a burst of creativity in art, in music, in theology, in understanding halakha, that is really having a much more subversive and revolutionary effect on the way we experience our Judaism.
Fascinating. Thank you, Professor Ross. Thank you so much, and you and your family should be blessed with good health and continued success in all your holy endeavors.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.